Witam serdecznie w kolejnym odcinku podcastu About Time, w którym rozmawiamy na tematy, które uświadamiają nam, czym jest szczęście i równowaga w życiu, a przede wszystkim pokazują drogi dotarcia do nich. Dzisiaj porozmawiamy o zmysłach, jako narzędziach do pełnego wykorzystania swojego potencjału, energii, kreatywności, a także szczęścia. Moją gościnią jest Gretchen Rubin, autorka bestsellerów New York Timesa, m.in. The Happiness Moment i właśnie wydanej po polsku Siły 5 zmysłów. Jest także gospodarzem popularnego podcastu Happier with Gretchen Rubin i założycielką wielokrotnie nagradzanej aplikacji Happier. Hello Gretchen, it's really nice to have you here.
I'm so happy to be talking to you. Thank you.
Your book about senses is really amazing and it gave me so much question and inspiration. But I would like to start with the fundamentals, which would be what is a perception and how many senses we actually have?
Well, that is a great question. Scientists now believe that we have 33, maybe more senses. But I decided that for the purposes of my book, I would stick to what we could call the Aristotelian senses, or maybe like the childhood senses, which are the big five of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching. Because the other ones, they operate in the background. They're very important to our sense of vitality, but we're not aware of them the way we are of sort of the glamorous big five senses.
So what are the others? Just to mention that we have any other other than those five that you mentioned.
Like interoception or proprioception, ones like that, ones that people probably are only vaguely familiar with. They're very important, and scientists are studying them more and more. But they're not ones that we're typically aware of.
So you indulge into senses during your work at your book. And I was listening to some podcasts when you were saying about that, and you are saying that because getting into the sensor world is very mindfulness, but you are denying it. You are saying that you are not really, it wasn't really a meditation. So what kind of indulgence was it for you?
Well, for me, I realized that I was stuck in my head, that I was walking through the world and I would be thinking about my to-do list, or I would be thinking about some paragraph that I was writing in my head, and I would be very oblivious to the sights, the smells, the sounds around me. And I thought, I need to get out of my head and into the world and really appreciate the moment as it's happening. And I think for many people, this is a kind of mindfulness where it's really being mindful of the passing moment, appreciating the moment. It's not meditation in the kind of disciplined thinking that some people do. For me, it's much more playful and free flowing. Just kind of a celebration of all the sensory information of the world around us.
So what was the most surprising thing that gathered you when you were trying and exercising those senses?
Well, what astonished me was how different is the world in which all of us live. And I knew that intellectually. Like, I think we know, like, sure, some people have color blindness, so they don't see colors the way other people do. Or, but when you realize people really experience the world in a very different way. Because I used to think, well, the world is kind of the world. I mean, how different can it be? But here are just some examples. I live in New York City, and here, just as we're talking, a siren could go by my window, and I would not hear that siren. I hear sirens all the time. So my brain doesn't say, hey, there's a siren. So often if I'm recording a podcast, my producer will say, wait, there's a siren, because I just don't hear it. But he said that in Los Angeles, people don't hear helicopters because there are so many helicopters in Los Angeles. So the brain just brings that information to the back. Or you can't smell your home the way a guest smells it. When a smell is very familiar to us, our brain doesn't flag it for us. So someone else could walk into your home and it really smells like cologne, or it really smells like dog hair, but you won't smell it because to you it's so familiar. I gave up sugar. I quit eating sugar a long time ago. And one thing I notice is that I'll sort of dimly be aware of a sweet smell, like outside of a bakery, kind of on the very outside of my awareness. But when I ate sugar regularly, I would really notice those smells. But now my brain is like, that information's not useful to you. So we'll just push it to the background. And so just realizing that, the way people respond to sound, like if I'm concentrating, I really need silence, but some people want music. Some people want a busy hum, like a coffee shop. We all have our different preferences, our different annoyances, the different things that we notice. And that was surprising to me.
Yeah, it's also always the question of the communication, because if you have so many different awareness of things or participation of things, it's you can't really communicate, because you are talking about different things, right? Like small, like what you see and how you see things. So
yes, in fact, one of the things they say is that, like, when you look at someone like a perfumer or a wine expert, it's not that they really taste so much better, but they have so much more vocabulary. Like they're so much better able to kind of discern and describe what they're experiencing. So it's not like they actually have like a superpower of tasting or smelling, but they've just developed their communication ability so much more to such a greater level of sophistication. So right to your point.
Yeah, it's a good lesson for others, because if we can learn it, we much more reach our life. Okay, but anyway, if it's very individual, so are there any general rules? Why do we need those senses? How do we use them?
Well, they're very important for evolution. Like each one of them really helps us in the world. Like you look at something like color. Sometimes I think we think of color as being sort of decorative, like something that makes the world more beautiful. But actually, color is very, very helpful in helping us pick out objects against patterns, detecting motion. If you've ever looked at a black and white photo and a color photo, you see how much more difficult it is to just discern what's in it. Color helps us know when fruits are ripe. It serves all kinds of very important functions. And so a lot of times when you look at how our senses function, you realize it is because of this evolutionary basis. So back to this idea of smell and how we don't perceive smell all the time. It's a difference detector. It's meant to alert us about like opportunity or danger. But then once we've registered it, it fades out that experience so that a new experience could come in. So let's say you smell cookie, and it doesn't fade away. Well, then maybe if a smell of burning came in, you wouldn't be able to detect it. So the brain is constantly trying to help us survive by the way that we experience our senses. So they're really important, and they all work together. A lot of our times we think that we're using one sense, but we're actually using senses in combination. So you think that you're using your hearing, but you're actually using your seeing as well. For instance, when we're listening to people speaking, we actually get a lot of information by looking at the way their lips and their faces are moving. Even hearing people who don't know lip reading actually use that information quite a bit. So your sense of sight is really aiding your sense of hearing in ways that you might not realize.
Yeah, it's like a complex experience, actually.
Yes. No, that's one of the things that I realized. I thought I was studying the five senses in isolation, but in life, they are collaborating all the time. Also, when we're focusing on one senses, the other senses will kind of pull back. So or make room. So that's why if you go to a concert, they lower the lights because it's easier to hear when you don't have as much visual stimulation. Or when you kiss somebody, you might close your eyes because then you can experience the sensations more intensely because you're not distracted by what you're seeing. So they adjust for each other constantly.
So sounds like a great cooperation then.
Yeah.
But do we have primary and secondary senses?
Well, the way the human brain is hardwired, we are hardwired for sight. It takes up the most real estate in the brain. It is, it is the dominant sense. And if the sense of seeing comes into conflict with another one of the senses, usually the sense of sight will trump. So an example of this in everyday life is the way flowers now are often bred for their beauty and their resistance to disease, but not so much for their smell. Because if there's a trade-off, people are more likely to be guided by their sense of sight. And same things with sort of fruits. Many fruits or like tomatoes have been bred for their color, their shape, their size, their consistency. And then maybe people say they don't taste as good as they did. Well, that's because they know if you're in a grocery store and you're looking at a fruit, you're going to be very influenced by the way that it looks, even more than the way you end up understanding the way it tastes. So we are hardwired for sight. But it's interesting. One of the things that I found as I was working on the book is that most of us have a neglected sense. So this is a sense that, and by the way, people can take a quiz. If you go to GretchenRubin.com/quiz, there's a very short free quiz that will tell you your most neglected sense. And the thing about the neglected sense is this is a sense that we don't use for comfort or pleasure. We tend not to want to learn about it. We don't use it to have adventures with other people. We're often more aware of the annoyances or irritations of that sense than the pleasures or comforts of that sense. And so when you know your neglected sense, then that's like a lot of opportunity, because you think, well, with your appreciated sense, like if you really appreciate your sense of taste, then you're probably already doing a lot of things to enjoy your sense of taste and to explore your sense of taste. But if you neglect your sense of smell, maybe there's a lot of things that you could add to your life that would give you a lot of pleasure and comfort and adventure and engagement with other people in ways that you haven't done before. So, for instance, one of my neglected senses is the sense of hearing. So I went to a sound bath. I don't know if you have sound baths in Poland, but they're very fashionable here in the United States. And I had never been to one because I'm like, I'm not that into my sense of hearing. But then when I thought I should have an adventure with my sense of hearing, what could I do? I was like, oh, I'll make a date with a friend and we'll go experience the sound bath. I'm kind of curious. What is that like? And I had a lot of fun doing that. So because I knew that was a neglected sense for me, my most neglected sense is the sense of taste, which for many people is their most appreciated sense. But I found a lot of ways to tap into the sense of taste. But whatever your neglected sense is, there's a lot of things that you can do to just get more enjoyment and comfort out of that sense.
Exactly. You are talking about enjoyment, and this is what my question was before, because you're saying that evolutionary, we have this kind of sense warning, and they are supposed to warn us from things. And we generally think that senses are for pleasure and indulging. So, and now you're saying that it is really a pleasure. So it's good that we use it for both, right?
Yes. No, you're exactly right. On the one hand, they're very important for saving us from danger, warning us. I mean, one of the things that people have talked about with electric cars is that electric cars don't make noise, but cars are dangerous. And the fact that you could hear a car coming, it was really important. And people relied on the fact, and that you can, by the sound of it, you can very instantly know, how fast is it coming? How close is it to me? There's a huge amount of very important safety information that comes from sound, but with an electric car, we don't have that. So now there's all these regulatory attempts to figure out, well, how do we need to add sound? What would that sound be like? How does it have the information that it needs to give us that important signal? But then you're exactly right. We also turn to these senses for pleasure and comfort. They're a huge part of our ordinary enjoyment of everyday life. And then, of course, nature always tries to make it fun to do what nature wants us to do. So we like to eat. We enjoy the taste of food because we need to eat, and so we want to eat what's. Well, now it's tricky because of, food engineering. Sometimes we love the taste of something that maybe is not so healthy for us, but we're supposed to like the taste of things that are healthy for us. That's what was meant to be.
Let's come back to the roots when it was easy this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we were saying that the senses cooperate with each other, and my question would be: what if they get some contradictory information, like a different information from one source of information? What do they do? Is it a power game? One is winning, or how does the brain cooperate with different information from different senses?
Well, as I say, usually sight will trump. So there's a really interesting phenomenon called the McGurk effect, MCGURK or CK, McGurk effect. It's really fun to go online and look at this. And what the McGurk effect is that if your brain hears a sound, but is seeing somebody speaking in a way where it's inconsistent with the sound that you're hearing, like it will correct what you hear so that you think that you're hearing what you're hearing so that it matches what you're seeing. This is uncanny. You think that a person is making a different sound with their mouth, but your brain is fixing it. It's kind of like an optical illusion, only including sound. And so, or something like when you go to a movie, you think that the sound of the actors' voices is coming out of their mouths because your brain corrects that so that what you're hearing and what you're seeing line up. But in fact, that sound is coming from somewhere else. So it is the fact that the brain will cooperate, that sight usually trumps. But then also all our expectations also shape what we experience. So for instance, the smell of Parmesan cheese is very close to the smell of vomit. And if you think what you think you're smelling will have a very big difference on what you are smelling. I had this experience with my daughter. We had a narcissus plant, which has if you know narcissus plants, they have a very, very distinctive, sharp odor. Some people like it, some people don't like it. And she didn't know that the flower had a smell. And she was so relieved to find out that the smell that she'd been picking up in her apartment was coming from the plant. She's like, oh, I don't like that smell at all. I thought maybe there was like a dead mouse in the walls because I kept picking up this smell. But then once she knew it was like a flower smell, it was just kind of an odd, distinctive flower smell. She's like, oh, well, now I like it. Because when she thought, oh, it's something gross, she didn't like the smell. But then when she thought, oh, I like it, it smells good. Or maybe like a pine smell. If you think, ooh, I'm smelling a pillow full of pine needles, this smell of pine feels natural and beautiful, that might be really good. But if you're thinking, oh no, this is this harsh industrial floor cleaner that's pine scented, well, that smells strong and chemically and off-putting. So even our expectations will shape what we think we're experiencing and whether we like what we're experiencing or not, because what of our associations. I mean, one thing people assume is that colors have will have certain values, like blue is calming or yellow is cheerful. But actually those are all cultural associations. There's nothing inherent in a color that has any kind of particular weight or nature to it. Those are all cultural associations.
Coming to individual, it's like when you say that blue is calm. So is it generally calm, or I can see blue differently than you do, and for me it might be irritating, right?
Yes, exactly. What are my own what is my own personal landscape look like? And right now, a friend of mine hated the smell of roses because she associated them with her mother's funeral. And so she couldn't stand the smell of roses because there's nothing inherently good or bad about the smell of roses. It's whatever our association is. So her association was very painful, so she hated the smell.
So you are saying also that the senses are kind of providing the memories, or like packing the memories, aren't they?
Yes, the power of the senses to evoke memories is so powerful. Each of the senses. And this is something that can be really fun to experiment with if you want to evoke memories. I myself have I feel like I don't have a good memory for my own life. So I'm always trying to come up with ways to remember my own life better. And what's great about the senses is they give us a hook to go back into our previous experiences and maybe remember things that we forgot we remembered. So if you ask yourself, Like, what did my childhood bedroom look like? Maybe you look at old photos. What did my old toys look like? What did my old clothes look like? Or I made a taste timeline where I made a timeline of my life and I wrote down all the foods that I either liked the most at that time or that I ate at that time and no other time. Like, I drank Diet Peach Snapple during law school and only during law school. So I have a very strong association with it. But so, and then you can reminisce with other people. Like, I called up my sister because, my childhood memories are her childhood memories. And so we talked about all the tastes that we remembered together, like a coffee cake that our grandparents used to bring at Christmas time, or like a certain kind of food, like junk food that our grandparents would buy us that our parents wouldn't buy us, or these kind of cookies that we used to make when we were little that we haven't made ever since. And it was so fun to reminisce with her about that. But you can do that. You can do that with sound, with your sense of hearing. A lot of people have very strong associations with certain songs in certain times of their life. That can be a super powerful thing to do. You could make a timeline of your life with songs. Now, touch, I think, would be a little bit harder, but a lot of times a certain touch of something will bring back a flood of memories. Like my grandfather worked on the railroad and had very grimy hands. So he had this kind of sanded soap that he used. And I actually bought myself a bar of that soap just so I could experience that very particular texture again. And it just flooded me with memories of being, 8 years old and standing next to my grandfather when he came home from work. And so we can tap into, like your favorite stuffed animal from childhood, where maybe there was something that you used to hug and touch and carry around, or a special blanket. These hold so many memories for us that we can tap into by using our five senses to call forth those memories.
So the most vivid memories would be stored by few, not just one sense, or it depends on the primary or neglected sense that you use to store this memory?
Well, that is a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think probably the more complete the memory, the more senses that are involved, probably the stronger the memory would be, just because it would be a more vivid experience. But whether people, and I think you're right, I never actually thought about it, but I bet you're right that what your neglected sense is maybe holds fewer memories for you because you just weren't as tuned into it. Like, I'm not one of my most neglected senses is hearing, and I don't have a lot of strong memories tied to music. Like, I don't use music as a way to evoke the past very much, not compared to other people. So that's interesting. You could think about that. What is the way for you that you would most tap into those memories for yourself? But one of the things about the neglected sense is it changes over time. I think that you might be, as a young person, you might spend a lot of time on your sense of hearing because you listen to music. Maybe you played in a band when you were young. Maybe you learned piano when you were young. And then as an adult, when you had young children, you sort of weren't going to concerts or listening to music or practicing an instrument. And so then you sort of neglected it, but then you could come back to it. So I do think that the neglected sense is something that changes at different times of our lives, or that we can actually work on. Now that I know that that I neglect my sense of taste, I've spent a lot of time not neglecting my sense of taste. So I don't neglect it anymore. Even though at one stage of my life, it definitely was one that I neglected. So that's interesting to think about how over time you might have better, more or less vivid memories, depending on what senses you were paying the most attention to at that time. That's a very interesting question. I need to think about that. What an interesting insight.
You are saying also, and also kind of struck me that that we mostly we concentrate our senses on other people. Is it? Why is it? Is it because of the danger, or because of, I don't know, other feelings that we have to live in community and we need it? Why do you think it is?
Absolutely. Again, this is evolution. Like, we are among the most social species on the planet. We depend on each other. for survival, and other people mean opportunity or danger. And so the brain like flags anything related to people gets special attention. So our sense of hearing is particularly acute around kind of the sound of the human voice. We're much more likely to pick up a sound if it sounds like someone talking than if it just sounds like, other noises. With seeing, we're very, very attuned to faces. There's whole parts of the brain that do nothing but interpret and remember faces. It's remarkable. Think about it. How many faces you can recognize in profile, part of a face, moving, different at different ages. Because when you think about it, all faces are pretty much the same, and yet we are really good at telling faces apart. And we will see faces where there aren't faces. Like you'll see faces like on in the bark of a tree or on the front of a car, because our brain is just looking for those faces because they hold so much information for us. It's like a user interface. The face tells us so much. And we also and there's a huge amount of research on this right now with the sense of touch, how we have a particular system that is focused on kind of social touch, the touch, sort of gentle touch. And I think that there's going to be a huge amount of new research coming out, because if you think about it, all, human culture throughout time have really focused on touch as kind of an avenue of healing and comfort. And but now we're really starting to do the research to understand the mechanics of that in the body. And so we're focused on other people. And this is why sometimes it can be distracting to try to focus when there are other people around, because the brain is saying, what are they saying? Do they look mad? Are they having fun? Are they talking about me? Like, what is happening here? The brain really is paying attention to that information. It can be distracting.
So what are the superpowers of each senses? Perhaps we start with the vision, because as you said, it's our primary one.
Well, the superpower of the sense of sight is that it really will show us what is happening at a distance. So this is like, we don't need to be close up to anything. We don't have to be in touch with it. It's showing us something that's far away. We are very good at judging how far away things are. We're very good at judging what color things are, even under changing color conditions. It's very good at helping us understand what is happening in our environment.
So how can we work on it? Because I think we are using it a lot of. So what we can do to improve it, our relationship with the vision or the interpretation of what we see?
Well, one thing that is helpful sort of with all the senses, I would say this is an exercise that works with all the senses, is to help ourselves pay more attention to it. Because this is the thing, is that it's if you're someone like me who gets stuck in your head, it's very hard to like stay in the senses. So I started keeping a 5 senses journal, and I actually have a journal like on my site that a person that's like nicely done, but you could just make your own journal with a notebook where you write seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching every day. And then you write down one notable memory or that happened that day. So maybe, you had like a kind of food that you'd never had before. So you could write that down. Or you petted a friend's cat and it had the most incredibly soft fur. You could just write that down. And what that practice does is it helps us stay attuned to our 5 senses as we're moving through the day, because you're always thinking like, oh, is this something that I would write down in my 5 senses journal? And so, or like, I remember I was in a neighborhood of New York City that I hadn't been into in a long time, and I noticed that I could hear church bells. And I thought, well, have I been here before and I just never noticed the church bells because I was so oblivious to my sensory surroundings? Probably. Or maybe I just haven't been here when the church bells were ringing. That seems unlikely since they were ringing every 15 minutes. But I was able to notice those bells because I was thinking, oh, this would be something that I could write down in my journal. So that's a way to, whatever sense it is that you're working on, or all your senses, that can help you stay attuned for noticing it, as you say, like for really dialing into that sense as we're moving through our ordinary routines.
I'm just wondering how Instagram influences our need for beautiful pictures and looking around much more intense than we probably normally will do.
Yes. Well, here on that note, on like the allure of technology, here's something that people can do. If you feel like you're very distracted by your phone or by something like Instagram and you feel like you wish you spent less time on it, one of the things you can do with your phone is you can turn it to what's called grayscale. It's very easy to do in your settings. And what it does is it turns your phone screen from being color to being black, white, and gray. And it is much less fun to use it, much more utilitarian, much more difficult to navigate, much less enticing when it's black, white, and gray. So if you're a person who's looking for ways to step away from your phone, that is a major way. Also, if you have a child who really wants to use a device and is constantly begging you to borrow your phone or whatever, turn it to grayscale and just tell them that it's broken and you don't know how to fix it. Because they will be much less interested in using it if it's in black, white, and gray. Because you're right, the intense colors and visual stimulation of the phone is part of why we find it so hard to look away. There's that intermittent reinforcement of like constantly something to look at, constantly something new and interesting. All those faces, right? What it's literally called Facebook. We love faces and social media. Like you're getting more faces in your eyeballs than ever before could ever have been imagined in history. And that's part of why it's so tempting.
So what does the overstimulation does? Because we are overstimulated, as you said, with the pictures, with the colors, with the sounds, probably, with the quality and with the how fast it's changing all the time. So
it's interesting because on the one hand, we're overstimulated. There's so much to see. If I'm watching a movie, I'm seeing all these visual images, but I'm also hearing a soundtrack, like in a way that I would, adding to the emotion in a way that I would never have in ordinary life. If I'm eating food, it might be hyper processed to hit every bliss point of taste in a way that I wouldn't have been able to experience 100 years ago. So in that way, we're overstimulated. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are also feeling understimulated. Like you're seeing things, but through a screen. And so things feel kind of flat and drained. And like you're talking to somebody through a screen. So you see them, but you're not smelling them. You're not exchanging like currents of air. You're not picking up on the nuances of how they're moving. You're not shaking their hand or giving them a hug. It's music, but it's not being played in person. You're not feeling the vibrations in the same way. And so I think that right now it seems like people love the idea of the five senses. They're very interested in anything that feels immersive. And I think it's because on the one hand, people feel overstimulated, and on the other hand, they feel understimulated. So we feel out of balance. It's like too much and not enough. And so I think people are seeking to somehow get back into their bodies and get back into balance by some kind of direct connection to their senses.
Yeah, you're totally right. I totally agree that it's kind of flat, the stimulation that we are getting. And as you said, we are just relying on our sight because of the flat screen that we are, or hearing, which is also not like a 3D hearing, but it comes from somehow a speaker. So that's maybe why we are so stuck in our head, because everything is processing there and we don't really experience the outward. So we have to go back to the forest to see.
Well, no, exactly. And I think that's why something like forest bathing or spending time in nature is so appealing to people, because it feels like that immersion and that sort of total experience. It's funny, I have a podcast, the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast, and from time to time, I'll meet people who listen in person, and they always are so surprised. And I've had that where I've listened to people's podcasts and then I've met them in person, and it's like, oh my gosh, there they are in 3 dimensions. Like they're an actual person with a face, and like a size it's just kind of a shock to realize like, oh, there's an actual person there, because you're so used to this very kind of filtered aspect of somebody's their disembodied voice seems so funny when it's coming out of their actually embodied body. And I always find that to be such a kind of eerie moment. And because I've been on both sides of it, where somebody's seeing me who's only heard my voice, or I'm finally seeing somebody. I actually voice identified somebody, a podcaster. She has a very distinctive voice, and I was standing behind her in line, and I was like, wait, I know who that person is. It was the strangest feeling to see to have a voice all of a sudden turn into an actual person. And it's great that we have these technological ways to connect. I think it's incredibly valuable, but I do think it has this consequence of making us want to somehow get back into a state of balance.
Yeah, definitely. About hearing, because I think it's very interesting, and I'm super interested in the music and how the waves affect our brain, because there are some researches that actually proves that the music can upload our mood or download it. So tell about that. How does it work, and how can we kind of manage that?
No, you're absolutely correct. One of the quickest, easiest ways to intervene in your mood is to listen to like some of your favorite upbeat songs. And so listening to music helps people stay energized and enjoy exercise more. So this is why gyms will play music. Music helps people to like come into like uniform behavior with each other, which can be really important if you're like, doing work, having people, work in unison or in some kind of coordinated way. It's interesting though, because back to this idea of evolution, one of the things that puzzles scientists is that music is a universal cultural practice. Every human culture throughout time and across the world has music. Of course, it's very different, but they all have music. And the question is, why? Why is something that is not necessarily essential for life, why is it so ubiquitous? And they think maybe it has to do with people being able to coordinate with each other. Maybe it is the way to like bring people together, because since we are so social, it is important that we be able to coordinate and come together. Maybe it is the way that it affects mood. Maybe it's an outgrowth of our other kind of creative exploring, curious the aspects of human nature. So there's a lot of different theories about why that might be. But for whatever reason that it exists, it's definitely very true. It's very tied to memory, as we were talking about before. It's very tied to mood. For many people, it's very tied to feelings of transcendence. Listening to music can fill people with awe, with a sense of wonder, with a sense of the poignance of life. It's outstanding in evoking emotion, and it's also for many people a really important aspect of there's the touch aspect with it, because you're like striking the keys or strumming an instrument. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes from just the tactile aspects of people who are playing music. And playing together, that can be a huge part of people's enjoyment of other people, is to, listen to music together, go to concerts together, even more, sing together or play music together. And it's a source of, like exploration and fun. People love finding a new song that they love or a new artist that they love. I think, now it can feel sort of overwhelming because there's so much that's available to us. But for some people that feels overwhelming, but for many people that feels very, very exciting. Music is I have to say, one of the things that I realized writing Life in Five Senses is I'm not really a music lover the way I think a lot of people are, where they love an artist and they listen to everything from that artist, or they love a genre of music like hip hop and they love listening to hip hop. I like a song. Like I'll like one song by an artist and I will listen to that one song over and over, and I will love that one song, but it doesn't make me want to listen to more songs by that artist or in that genre. I just like the one song. So I don't actually listen to music that much, but I've become much better at looking for the song, or like being attuned to finding a new song that I love and listening to it. But I'm kind of unusual. I think most people listen to music in a different way. But even someone like me really loves listening to music when it's something that I love.
I totally understand. I'm the same person. I'm like song
you are?
person, totally.
Yes, because other people, they just like listening to music in a different way, right?
No, I love songs, but I'm getting fed up and I need to find another love of my song. But it's a song that makes me kind of thrilled. So yeah, totally.
It's very hard if you're a song lover, it's exciting to find a new song because they're few and far between, at least for me.
Exactly. We should share our Spotify.
Yes, exactly. Very short. I know. Yeah.
But as you said, I think that the hearing and the music is a very social kind of sense. What about the touch? I would say it's very individual, isn't it?
Well, but unless we're touching other people, which is a really important source of touch. So, it's interesting. It is such a powerful connection that there's all kinds of rules about it. I mean, obviously there's some kinds of touch that's illegal. Or if not illegal, inappropriate, or even just in casual or day-to-day, there are a lot of just etiquette rules about how close do you stand to somebody? Do you hug them? Do you shake their hand? How long do you shake their hand? Can you, it's so powerful, the touch of another person, that we really regulate it, and we are very, very sensitive if somebody violates the rules, especially if they would do something illegal, but even just kind of slightly inappropriate, we are very aware of it. So, and then there's all kinds of ways that people can sort of find in order to be touched in ways that are socially appropriate. So that's like getting a massage, having acupuncture, there's different kinds of practices where you can getting a manicure. Part of it is that you're being touched by another person. I think this is one of the reasons people love animals. I saw this with my husband. We got a dog, and my husband wasn't particularly a dog person. My children really wanted to get a dog, so he was like, okay, let's get a dog. He loves the dog. And part of it is my husband is a real touchy, loves hugging, loves holding hands, very that kind of person. And he loves having a dog. He'll pull the dog onto his lap. He's constantly petting the dog, holding the dog. It gives him that feeling of touch, which for him is very social and very important. But then I think for some people, it's not. They don't like to be touched. They have a much different threshold for it. And again, it's these different experiences that we all bring to it. We have, and I think this is one of the things that's important to remember, is that we need to be considerate of other people's preferences. And just because I feel like something is comfortable doesn't mean that someone else is going to think it's comfortable. So if someone's like, well, I'm a hugger, I love to hug, it's like, well, maybe that person doesn't want to be hugged. Maybe there's somebody who is very uncomfortable with people touching them, especially people they don't know well. To just be aware of that, just the way you would be aware that some people would prefer that you not wear perfume to the office because they don't like heavy smells, or some people don't want to wear scratchy fabrics because they're very bothered by unpleasant textures. We all need to try to create environments where everyone can feel comfortable and thrive, because we really bring such different preferences to the table.
Yeah, it's totally different dimension of experiencing thing.
Yes.
So last question. What would you say, which sense would be the one that humankind would survive without?
Probably it would be smelling. Yeah, that's probably the one that would be the easiest. It's hard to imagine life without touch.
Exactly.
I can't even imagine what that experience would be. But it certainly would be life-threatening. So, there's research on people who don't experience pain, and that's a very, very dangerous circumstance to be in. So I do think that smell is the one that we can probably most easily give up. But even that, I think we underestimate how much our sense of smell contributes to our vitality, our sense of connection, our sense of just being present in the world. They're all powerful. They're all so beautiful. They're all important.
Thank you very much, Gretchen, to bring us to this world of sensuality and indulging in our own emotions and memories as well. Thank you. I think we now turn our screens black and white and try to not overstimulate us, but be here and now and indulge in the moment with all our senses.
Well, thank you so much. I so enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks.